First of all, I was a third round draft choice out of the University of Georgia as a quarterback. And if you play at a major school and you're a third round draft choice, they don't think you're good enough or smart enough to be the starting quarterback. And I was going into a new franchise team. And new franchise teams were put together by the existing teams would freeze 34 of their 40 players on the roster, and we'd get to pick 3 of the bottom 6. Obviously, that's not going to be a winning formula. And so I go to training camp in Bemidji, Minnesota, and we have 6 quarterbacks there in camp. And one of them was we had traded our number 1 pick of 62 the next year to the New York Giants to have a veteran quarterback to start. His name was George Shaw, University of Oregon. And George Shaw was replaced at Baltimore a few years before that by John Unitas after George Shaw had won Rookie of the Year. So here we are at Bemidji, six. Then we have 5 other quarterbacks that they've got brought in, that free agents or whatever. And I think back about that. Every one of those guys were at least as big or bigger than I. Every one of them had an arm just as good as my arm or better than my arm. And yet I didn't have a escape strategy. If I didn't work out there, I didn't even think about what would be the result of that. I didn't know. I didn't have a go-to alternate strategy. And you know what? I found that to be really good. And so anyway, we went on and we played. We lost all of our exhibition games. In our last exhibition game, we played the Chicago Bears, Monsters of the Midway. Their owner was George Halas. He was the founder of the National Football League. They had great players. And we played them in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, in an exhibition game before about 4,000 or 5,000 people. And they bludgeoned us, maybe 48-7, just killed us. It's awful. We played them 2 weeks later, and we're going to play them in the opening game of the season. We were 28-point underdogs. And nobody expected us to win because an expansion team had never won. The year before, Tom Landry, the great Hall of Fame coach. Tom Landry had the Dallas Cowboys as an expansion team. They went through 12 games. They lost 11 and tied 1. And here we are playing the mighty Bears. And Van Brockland, my coach, had told me in the week, "We're going to start you, kid. We're going to start you." And he put together the game plan. We go to the game day. He comes to me and says, "We're going to start George Shaw because he's a veteran and he ought to be the guy. We ought to get." And I understood that. But I told him, I said, "But if you want to win the game, you better put me in." And so we go through most of the first quarter. We haven't even made a first down, I don't think. We're behind 6-0, whatever it was. And he put me in. We had a great game plan. I understood the game plan. I studied the game plan. I knew all the calls. I knew all the reads. And we ended up winning the game. We won it 37-13. And I completed 17 of 21 passes for 237 yards. That's back in the day, that'd be like 500 yards a day. I threw for 4 touchdowns and I ran for another in that victory. And it was one of the greatest upsets in the history of the National Football League. And what a way to start my career in the National Football League.